So, I was going to play a different deck this week. I had a list together for Mad Men, a discard-based creature aggro deck. I was going to sing Mad World, make some jokes about a TV show from 2007 that I haven't actually seen, and then lose 9 times to Baragoyf. I would have to explain how 2-for-1ing myself repeatedly could get me ahead in the game, why cards with madness aren't actually that good in the discard deck, and the correct pronunciation of Asmarana Maracadais in the Kaldakar. But when I woke up on Thursday morning and went through my collection, as all of us do every morning, I happened upon a pair of Delightful Gentlemen. Now, I love this card. I've loved it since it came out, and it is genuinely good at breaking mid-range matchups. I got thinking about how I could put a Traxa into play with this, and maybe even play a sort of Jund mid-range deck with a Reanimator package. And then my brain went, Slimefoot and Squid Range. Welcome to 7-Point Highlander. Now, Slimefoot and Squid Range is pretty unoriginal for the most part. It's Jund, a handful of mana dorks which jump you into a mid-game of powerful threats and flexible, efficient interaction. You get ahead on board, trade off resources from your hand, and build in resilience with either threats which are recursive or somehow self-replacing. What this build adds is a light sprinkle of unfair nonsense on the salad of this existing structure. I tried this a few months ago with Grixis, and to be honest, it sucked. The first build just felt like bad bus stop mid-range, and the second build just felt plain bad. So if I hated it so much then, why do it again? And, spoilers, why do I like it so much more now? I'm planning to jump the curve in 2 different places here. Unlike my mid-bug deck from a few weeks ago, this is a truly green mid-range deck. I've got a package of mana dorks to accelerate me into my powerful mid-game, and to make the most of it, I've scooped out the curve at 2 in favour of playing more higher cost, higher impact creatures. But after my 4 drops, instead of rounding out with a couple of 5s, I skip straight to 7 and 8. See, the mana dorks serve a secondary function as perfect natural fodder for natural order, which makes Atraxa basically a free inclusion. On top of that, Zeke, Reanimate, and Worldly Fanatic are all powerful cards that I was going to play anyway. With all this stuff floating around, it's trivial to chuck in an Entomb and an Animate Dead on the off chance I get Atraxa a little more often. Splash another bomb or 2, maybe some interaction, which I would have considered, but gets better when there's stuff that I actively want to have in my bin, and hey. When I built my first Grixis version, the list I started with wasn't nearly as well set up to accommodate the Reanimator package. It only had 13 creatures for crying out loud. Obviously I was going to lose some pressure by replacing some of them with 8 drops. It didn't have an organic Atraxa setup built in, and it definitely didn't have mana dorks or carpeted flowers to hardcast the 8 drops if it needed to. These Grixis decks really thrive in that 1 to 3 mana range, and I didn't change enough to make the payoffs worth it. By contrast, Jund is already well set up to recur its existing pieces. Things like Grief, Fury, and Pyrogoyf love coming back so much that most Jund players are already on things like Worldly Fanatic, Animate Dead, and in some cases, Slimefoot and Squee. You can incorporate this Natural Order Atraxa package with no other degenerate behavior if you want. And there's also the fact that there are just more creatures in the deck, so you don't lose as much pressure swapping some out, especially since I'm cutting 5s for 8s, not 1s and 2s. I definitely went a little overboard on the curve adjusting. I was taking notes from a few other lists, mostly Zoe's second place list from Wationals, and their 5s and 6s all had ways to use them for below retail. I was happy cutting Fury since I don't think it'll be too useful in my local meta, but when some friends asked whether I had a fair Entomb target, I realised I'd cut Bloodbraid Challenger, which would have been fine to good. I also wound up replacing Fury with Trumpeting Carnosaur, which was definitely one of the choices. My point spread was the hardest to choose. There are some locked points. Reanimate is clearly the best point in the deck, and the most powerful parts of the mana package are clearly Deathrite Shaman and Ragavan. Fable of the Mirror Breaker would have been the second best point I could have had, but I don't have one on hand, and I made the delightful decision of changing my deck the morning of the event. The points I wound up not playing, I think, are the interesting ones. Demonic Tutor, Minsk and Boo, and recent addition Mental Misstep. I wound up cutting Misstep for Bombardiers to fill out my 3-drop suite, while I did consider using that point and another one for Minsk and Boo. I would have got the extra point by downgrading Vampiric Tutor to Demonic, but I think that's probably the worst downgrade on the points list, so I didn't end up making that decision. Next time I play the deck though, I'll probably just cut Vampiric altogether and run Minsk and Boo and Fable with those points. It just doesn't serve the mid-range plan at all, and it doesn't 3 points serve the Reanimator plan. The sideboard was a bit thrown together, and I mostly adapted it from my Grixis sideboard, hence some noticeable absences like Collector Roof. In the end though, I don't think it made the biggest difference on the night. The mana was the hardest part to get right. The deck is extremely pit dense, and I really want to curve out, but spending too much life can really harm my own pressure. What I wound up with was serviceable, but the deck would be so much better with dual lands. That's the deck, so let's get to the games. Kicking off against Nadu, I had some decent pressure despite keeping Miracle Max in my opening hand. I won the board, got them hellbent, and had them dead to my next attack. Then they fetched, I cut them straight to Nadu, and lost on the spot. Game 2 I kept a 6 with much less pressure, Thoughtseize, Carpet, and Halfling. I sandbagged the Carpet to try and bait them into fetching out more islands, but they were still able to play around it, and I wound up 1 mana short of hardcasting my Archon of Cruelty. That would have taken out their Nadu and won me the game, but close ain't good enough in this economy. Round 2 I got the mana-based blues. My opponent put me off double black with a random White Orchid Phantom, which neither of us really thought about at the time, since I had a basic to go fetch. But as the game went on, I realized I couldn't protect my Nether or Barrow-goyfs with the Inquisition of Kozilek in my hand, and they were able to deal with my whole board and beat me down. Then game 2, I got a 7 with just 1 Surveil land, a 6 with no lands, and with 5 cards in my opener, I couldn't fight the mid-range card advantage game. However, losing quickly isn't always a bad thing. I got to spend the rest of the round discussing the meta with the players at my table. I was particularly curious what they thought about Jund, since a few of the local bus stop players have been foregoing Grixis to try it out at locals. I also got to experience a generational speech, which explained to me that the lands deck is actually a psyop to keep the format's brightest minds from playing decks which are actually good. Or something like that, I don't know. I was daydreaming about looping Mystic Sanctuary in a Naya deck. Down at 0-2, I was introduced to a bit of a deck building anomaly in Shopless Shops. That's right, if you'd like to play a 7-point deck without the cards that make it good, the one and only Mr. Lee has got you covered. I led on a 1-lander with Grief, Reanimate, and Ragavan, and despite stripping their hand early, they started to make a comeback. With just a 3-4 Nethergoyf in play, facing down a lethal attack from an anti-causal Vestige, I ripped the one card which could win me the game, Broadside Bombardiers. You know, I almost cut this card. Sorry I doubted you, big dog. I had an even dirtier start in game 2, dorking into Dumb and Dumber and using Natural Order to get a Traxxas on turn 3. Now, I did consider getting Cube here because they had an Arena Rector in play, but I decided that big is best, and I think it paid off. They used Khan's Silex to wipe the board of all the small things, and their Arena Rector went and got Mugen, which gave them the mana to cast Palantir of Orthanc and exile a Traxxas. The situation here looks pretty dire. While I do have a Zeke in hand and I got to discard a Troll of Khazad-dûm to hand size last turn, that's only 6 points of hasty power, and Ugin is at 7 loyalty. If only there were some way to get something big into the graveyard right now that I could use. Oh, hey Palantir. An anti-causal Vestige, you say? Don't mind if I do. I rounded out the night with a swift loss to white-black midrange, where I got punished in basically all of the ways you'd expect an 8.3 colour midrange deck to get punished. I was choked on mana with Wasteland, I was pressured early with strong creatures, and I was aggressively outvalued with big beaters like Overlord. My hand attack felt especially useless, since their pieces are all at worst replaceable and at best recurrable. There's game for me to play in the matchup, but the match itself was not close. Does Jund need Entomb to be good? No. But My experience with this build does speak to a sentiment that I've developed playing the format. If you're not doing something degenerate, you better have a damn good reason. With just 2 slots, you can take a perfectly strong mid-range deck and give it a random I win button that comes up 1 in 10 games. And if you want, you can bump that number up a little. Going forward, I think I'd pull back on the Reanimator plan just a bit. It's tricky to find the right balance, but I think this package is all you need to take a standard Jund mid-range deck and add that little bit of spice to it. I also wouldn't bother with any Reanimator tech in the sideboard. It's just not what you're planning to do. Now, I've finally got my hands on some of the tech that I need to build a deck I've been wanting to play for a while. So I hope you tune in next week for that one. It's going to be bizarre. Until I see you then, good luck, have fun, and may the best wizard win.